Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Mossi Thurlow scale,
or MOTS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode. Hello and welcome back to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and Television. This week we had a little bit of a we'll talk about it. We had to change up plans at the last minute. But we're going to be discussing the new film out on Amazon Prime now, Sound of Metal, directed by Darius Marder, starring Rizz Ahmed. I am going to be your host, Steve Ramosi, joined here today by Jonathan Ian Manzer.
What? That'll be my last podcast joke.
Indeed. Scott Thurlow.
Black Gammon Forever is my favorite band.
That is a good one. And Chris Morgan.
let the music play.
So let's move on. I think, Scott, you have a log line for us.
Yes, so the sound of metal is the sound of serious silence.
Indeed, indeed. And Ian, you're going to be talking about plot, but first, I don't even know if we want to mention, well, I'm just going to mention it because I mentioned it in the opening, but we were going to watch Free Guy this week because it was supposed to come out.
Free Guy ain't so free.
In fact, and then it didn't. So we had to, at last minute, change plans. I heard good things about this film, so I decided to suggest it, and we all watched it. So here we are. Ian, why don't you tell us about the plot?
So a young man who's an ex-addict is the drummer with his girlfriend. For about 4 years now. And then all of a sudden he is struck with hearing loss, which is an actual legitimate. I studied audiology a little bit when I was doing my linguistic thing, and heavy music can damage your the cilia in your cochlea and all that. So and it's about him going through the process of adapting to his new life, meeting a group of people, going basically to a rehab, but also school where he learns sign language, becomes a kind of community leader, but he's drawn back to his old life and he has to make that choice. It is a well-performed, very slow pace, but because it takes it very seriously. This is a very accurate representation of unfortunate. So the thing is, I actually did take a look, and it is praised by the deaf communities for its representation. So I'm assuming that, and from what I understand, they put a lot of effort into capturing, trying to avoid both kind of a saccharine representation, like the kind of saintly representation of people with disabilities, but also taking very seriously. And overall, I actually thought it was a very well done film. There's a touch of, so it is a rehab thing too, and it feels very much like a rehab film in the way that it's treating the character. And that is also a focal point of the film. So I'm going to give it a strong 2 overall, because it is very slow and deliberately paced. And it's a 2 hour, it's exactly like 2 hours. Yeah. So it at times feels its length, but I was impressed overall.
I'll say I'm going to follow suit. I'm going to give it a strong 2 as well. I could maybe convince of a 3, but that might be a bit of a stretch, but certainly it was rock solid as hell. I felt maybe the intro, it took me personally at least a little bit to get into it, but once I was into it, I did think the story and the pacing and the acting, as we'll talk out, all came together to create a very well done and intriguing and engaging story. So yeah, I don't have much more to add plot wise. I do think it was just well crafted throughout, and I'll give it a strong 2. So
yeah, I think I'm right there with you guys on a 2. There were some parts of the plot, I guess, of the story that
Much as it is.
that weren't like super compelling, other than the fact that Rizz was in the scene, as him playing this character Ruben is the best part of this movie by a wide margin, I think. But like, the plot itself was fairly strong, I thought. And I do like as you mentioned, Ian, this might not be part of the plot per se, but some kind of like side area. But the way that they treat the deaf community in this film is really well done, as well. So yeah, I think I'm going to come down on it too for a lot of the reasons that you guys mentioned.
I'm what I'm doing is I'm giving this movie full marks, but I also kind of feel like I want to make up for Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. I should have given that one a 3, and I want to give this one a 3 for the same reason, because the style of filmmaking, once it's that handheld.
It's a document because I believe the director has experience working in documentary.
Right. It's
cinema.
It's a cinema verite style.
Yes.
But the thing is, they both made me uncomfortable in the same way, and they both really affected me to the point where there's part of me that can't let it go right here. And I really wish I had, because my first impulse was to give Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always a 3. It touched me the same way, and it was like, it's basically that movie and the Charlie Kaufman film was like the only 2 films I really remember from this year, and I feel like this is going to be one of those films. As a musician, I mean, I'll get to it when we talk to protagonists, but there's a lot of things I identified with them. I did like the inclusivity of the deaf community. One of the actresses who's on, I'm still watching The Walking Dead. It's the momentum. But one of the actresses.
But why?
I don't know, dude.
Don't answer. Just keep going.
But there's an actress on it. The woman who played Diane, the teacher, is a deaf actress, and now I know where she was last season. And there's so many little nuances that I really appreciate. Like the one scene that broke me, I started crying, was when he's teaching the kids drums.
That was a very highlight scene. I agree. Like that was excellent all around. Yeah, good call.
Oh yeah. Strong 3.
So there, I don't blame you for that. It felt to me though that it was a combination of a movie like sometimes
Never, Rarely,
Sometimes, Always, which I never get the name down for that. And also, you remember there's I believe it was a Sandra Bullock film back in the day, like 21 Days when she goes to rehab.
Oh yeah.
And it felt like a combination of those 2 films. And perhaps that's where it's like there was no artificial drama in this. Everything was very real, but
it felt organic.
Yeah, but where Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always had like incredible stakes to it. This had stakes to it, but it never reached that. It was more about him trying to choose. Like, it's weird saying that deafness isn't stakes, but the emotional drama here is about him adapting and making the choice of trying to find the in a sense, the technological solution of getting and accepting his role. So I don't know, like, and that's where I think the slowness sets in, and it shouldn't have been done otherwise. But that's my kind of justification for it too. There,
okay, like I said,
it's really funny
for sure. Just not quite 100% for 3 is all.
It's really funny. It was a very slow paced movie, and I paused it for a second because I had to get up, and I realized like I had like 40, maybe 40, 50 minutes left, and I'm like, holy shit, like to me it was slow paced, but it flew by like Never. Sometimes, Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always.
The pacing was pretty
and I don't think I gave that film. I mean, this film affected me in the same way. And I don't think I gave that film as much praise. I don't want to distract from it, but the ending of this film was magnificent. I mean,
that it was.
He like the first thing I thought of is like he could feel the vibration.
No other ending to this film, I think. Like
he could feel the vibrations of like playing the drums, but he could also get it because the pulsing in of his eardrums. But they had to disconnect it, and now he's living in complete silence. He actually fulfilled the thing where it took him to lose.
He found a stillness.
He found a stillness, and I found it cathartic, tragic. There's too many things that came. There's so many things that came flooding in
at the end, but I think a little bit more sweet than bitter, if you will. Yeah.
But he did seem to be at peace. So yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think great arc and so forth. So we'll expand upon that. But 2 for me at least. But I totally see why you, from your angle, Chris, why you give it 3, and totally fine with that.
Sounds good. All right. So Scott, why don't you keep talking about the themes?
All right. Well, before I do that, how about we take a quick break, and we'll have a word from our buddies over at the American Slacker Podcast right now. We'll be back in a few.
Hey, this is Matt.
And Jesse.
We host American Slacker Podcast, your weekly rundown for weird news, entertainment suggestions, and unique games.
Every other week, we bring on guests from all walks of life, like comedian Mark Forward of Letterkenny.
Yeah, we just call it tuna up here. We're pretty clear that it's a fish.
And NYC stand-up powerhouse Ian Fidance.
I want to fucking punch you in the fucking face with positivity and fun, motherfucker.
Actor Brandon Crane of Stephen King's It.
Because a lot of the work that I did, like Wonder Years to It, they were all very, period 50s, 60s, and, chunks were all the rage.
And Art the Clown from Terrifier, David Howard Thornton.
They also had to make a mold of my face while I was there, so that was kind of claustrophobic in itself.
Musician Dan Simons of Just Surrender.
First time ever going out on tour, you remember every stop.
And Nick Thompson of Hit the Lights.
All the stuff that I think that people go through life, and it's just like my outlet for that.
Watch the video version of American Slacker on our YouTube channel and listen to our show on your favorite podcast app.
New episodes every Wednesday. Visit our website, aspodcast.com, for everything American Slacker.
That's it.
There you go.
And now I'm back talking about themes. So, I think the themes were strong. I mean, it's a character study, right? It's a character piece, which, granted, we brought up, like, just by happenstance, I suppose, or perhaps by choice of ours, some combination of such. Many of the recent films we have discussed and reviewed, or something like that. And I think, this will flow into protagonists, so I don't take too much away from you, Chris, when you get to that. But Rizz has to carry this film, and like you said, like, it's him, like, music and being a heavy metal drummer was his life. And it was made clear early on that he's a former addict. And I think this, it was implied that through meeting Olivia Cook's character, Lou, that they formed a stable relationship, and that gave him, structure and grounding. So when he starts to lose that, by losing his hearing, he's almost defines his life by his music and by being able, to produce it and hear things. And, like, there's even an early scene where they play like an old jazz record in their little camper or whatever, right? So as that, he has to deal with that, and it's just like, a person, like, one of their touchstones, like, pillars of their life is taken away by happenstance, circumstance, and how to, like, sort of deal with that. Of course, he almost goes through sort of the stages of grief, right? Like, he's angry, like denial, etc., like all that, right? You can't not do that, but I think it was a well executed portrayal of that. So it's just like you said, Chris, like, arriving of sorts, like, with your situation, and having run through the roller coaster of dealing with it, like, your reactions to it and what you do, like, try to, like, again, he goes for the surgery, and, like, at first he thinks, like, in his mind it's obviously built up, like, oh, this will solve my problem, right? But it's almost worse, like, especially, we'll get to this also in style, but the way that that what you're supposed to be hearing things as he hears them, like, it's almost worse, like, than versus just being completely deaf. And, like, that's the ending scene as well. He just completely takes it off and just sits there enjoying the silence of life for once, and at peace with himself in a situation. So I think it's some, like, half like of a redemption arc in a sense, and half, again, just like, coming to light, like, coming to a realization in a place, in a state in your life after something befalls you like this, that you can reconcile those things. So I think that was well done, and for those reasons, I'm giving it a 1.
One thing I liked about, and this is going to flow into themes, especially to the stages of grief, like you mentioned, his last scene with Lou, his girlfriend, where they kiss, and I'm like, they're holding on to this kiss very, very long. I'm having a feeling they're not connecting, and she gets up to get a glass of water, whatever, and take a sip of water, and he starts crying. He's like, it's okay.
It's a little awkward, but it earned that.
Yeah. It was perfectly realistic, and that was part of his acceptance. He's like, it's okay. Yeah. They've reached the natural conclusion.
Exactly.
the thing wasn't there. There's so many reasons they can't go back, like physically because he sold the trailer or the RV. And
like
then
literally metaphorically, yeah, that's good call, Chris.
she's still living with music, she's still living with sound, and he can never really be part of that world again. And she's kind of moved on, and he's kind of moved on. And no, I'm just giving this theme. It's a very, 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 very strong movie. I think thematically, it's one of these films where the narrative and the style and the protagonist and themes are going to be so close.
Sure.
There's going to be so much crossover between them. So I'm just going to stop there and give it a 1.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing that I wanted to talk about too is the way that they deal with addiction in this. And you see his addictive personality, even though he never uses it at all during the whole movie.
The only thing he does is smoke cigarettes, and even that, like, I believe. Sorry, Steve, just to interrupt you real quick. Like when he does that, when the onset of his deafness starts, and it's like that's alarming because Lou, his girlfriend's like, "You had a cigarette," and he's like, "Yeah." I think it's understandable at this point. But it comes out that he was, a pretty like more addicted to more harder substances than that. So that's all. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's that's kind of the thing is like you see his personality. There's a scene where he has sold all of his shit to like get this surgery, and the guy that runs the house that he's staying at is like, I don't know what you're doing, but you sure look like an addict to me right now. And like that scene was really well done, I thought. And it's kind of like it's kind of like him coming to this realization that he stopped doing the drugs or whatever, but he still is falling into the same bad habits and and so that I thought that was like a pretty strong part of the themes of this film as well. And yeah, I mean, just kind of like embracing the end of things, and the beginnings of new things. And like understanding that the end of something is the beginning of something else, I think is an important part of this film, especially towards the end. So that's my 2 cents.
Sounds like you're giving it a 1 as well. I think we all are, I believe.
Yeah. I just have one more thing. It's interesting because when you're in rehab, you kind of have to let everything go, and they tell you not to get in a relationship. There's stages of even getting back into interpersonal relationships, and what kicks him off the wagon is seeing Lou move on musically. And that's, because in other words, if they had made that clean break, it would have been harder at first, but he would have been able to carry on in
He's
the
still holding on to something from that. Yeah.
But that knocked him off that wagon, so to speak.
Yeah, but he needed to be knocked off that wagon to come to full acceptance of his state. So, but Weltschmerz.
Sure.
And that the acceptance of what cannot be any longer. I loved it. I'll give it a 1.
All right, sounds good. 1's all around, and it's going to come to me with antagonist. This is an interesting movie. I guess he's to some degree his own antagonist for a lot of this film, and
obviously that's what you want to say on the surface, right? I agree to an extent. Go ahead.
And there's also this like feeling of maybe life is the antagonist of this, but he's not with maybe even with the deafness, but his lifestyle has put him into the place where he is in this movie. Not to say that's not to make a judgment about it, but that he is where he is because of that. He's an ex-addict situation, or he's an addict because of the way his lifestyle, like the way that he had it, the way he lived before. Yeah. He's deaf probably because he's been playing loud ass music for X amount of years, whatever.
But I don't. It's interesting because I think the music saved him from. The music saved him from his addiction to a certain extent, and the woman did as well. So, fate could have befallen him much worse if not for the music. And it's ironic that what saved him from heroin is what causes deafness later on.
Well, maybe so.
And now he has to find something else to make
Yeah.
him
I
happy.
want to point out one thing. Sorry, like you mentioned, like I believe when he first goes to the doctor who's explaining to him, he's like, certainly, again, your lifestyle, like Steve-O, might have been a contributing factor, but you might have been afflicted by this even like otherwise, right?
Yeah.
He was like, we can't say for sure. Now, sure, like you might have had more risk factors, if you will, but I just wanted to point that out. Like it could have befallen him anyways. It's just that you're right. This character is in a situation which certainly does not help, if you will, overall. So
yeah, absolutely. But I don't have a good argument for this question, to be honest. Like I don't want to give it a 0 by any means, but also like, what do you guys think is the antagonist, I guess?
Weltschmerz, the pain that you feel the way life ought to be versus the reality of what it is. And he is fighting with going, as you mentioned earlier, he's going through all the stages of grief, and he's also dealing with a happiness he found that he lost, and that growth as a character to become a better person, because his world was very small. Literally, it was an RV with a woman he loved. Now, granted, I'm not besmirching that kind of lifestyle. A lot of people find happiness in that, but that was no longer an option. And even as much as he fought for returning to that, it was gone. And his growth as a person was to benefit the community. And I feel that he's likely to go down that path. Perhaps not with the group he was in, but he's found purpose. And without that conflict, there is no growth. And he certainly undergoes the growth throughout this. So it is the loss, dealing with that loss, and coming to the acceptance of that loss. And I think that loss is a great antagonist.
I'm still weighing it, Chris. I think you wanted to go next, so why don't you go ahead?
I was basically, Ian said it better. I was going to say the inability to try to control or conquer things that are beyond our ability to control or conquer, and trying a way to live with them, which is what Ian just said. So that's exactly what I was going to say. So I'm giving it a 1.
Right. Fair enough. So like, I guess I'm channeling like maybe the other week or in the episode or Mank episode came up where like anyone can almost always be their own protagonist. So like my buddy Joe who gets it on that one, like he's like, that feels a little cheap to say that. And I'm like, I guess it did kind of click in me, but maybe in this instance, I think you're right. Like the should/ought to be like how life is versus how we want it to be. Mm-hmm. That I think again, almost everyone can feel, and especially so in this situation of the character of the story. So that might convince me to give it like a possible softer 1. Like, I have no problems like doing either way, but I'm just trying to like run it out analytically, if you will. And I think you guys made good points. You're basically piggybacking on each other, which I think is a solid foundation. So yeah, I think at this point I might look at a softer 1, but still a 1 at this stage. So with that, what's your take, Steve-O?
Yeah, I think they convinced me in terms of that argument. It is all about how he deals with that loss. And before I go down the road of like really overanalyzing my initial reaction to it, I think I'm just gonna say, yeah, I it's strong enough for a 1, and I'm gonna agree with you guys. So,
all right, cool.
We'll give that a 1. And Chris, talk about protagonist.
Our protagonist's name is Ruben, and as I said,
Ruben Stone, by the way, awesome name for this character.
Yeah, that's right. And we've said so much about him and his journey. Thematic. This is what I'm saying. It's like themes and
they're all sort of
narrative are going to be so close. Yeah. But the thing that really I identified with, not just as a musician, but as I get a lot of fluid in my head. And I went to an ear, nose, and throat doctor a couple years ago, and yeah, Medicare for all, $800 to get a hearing test at the fucking hospital. But
that's it.
I remember going through because I sometimes get a ringing in my ear, and when I get my sound tech, I was thinking about every single concert I went to without earplugs, where I stood, the times I stood in front of my amp, and it turns out like it's just the fluid in my head. I've got basically somehow still the same hearing of a 10-year-old.
Sure, like I said, like
But
like I just sorry, just like I said earlier, like it could have been that, or it could have been something completely unrelated that like, but it obviously like it's going to seem as if those are contributing. So yes, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, buddy.
But like sometimes if like this week where I had a lot of postnasal drip, you kind of get that muffled feeling like your ears pop. So as soon as I knew the way the story was going to go, so there was no, right away what's going to happen. He's not going to be like, oh, it's just, postnasal drip or whatever. But watching him, he conveyed, even though I knew the ending, he was conveying all the stuff, like running through every single possibility, because, you can't minimize any one of our senses. And I loved the message that, we don't treat, deafness as a disability. We treat it as just, and I thought his journey and his wanting to embrace things, and then where he kind of fell off the wagon and he wanted to fix it. And just feeling that, like I said, from the simplest thing to the most complex things that I could never, ever fully, truly understand, he was able to take, or at least for me, he was able to take me with him on the journey. Like I was involved in his character. It really is a character study. And these things, you either hop on that character study right away about that protagonist, or they lose you right away. And I found him, to be your average person dealing with, unaverage, what's the word I'm looking for, difficult circumstances. And I was with him the entire time. So I'm giving him a very strong one.
Yeah, one for sure, a strong one at that. And yeah, Rizz was in that the previous thing we saw him in, like he was enjoyable enough in that, like I liked him in it. But I think this is a standout role for me. I think all out what you said, Chris, almost like the script, the directing, and him like embracing that character, I think all came together. That's why it's so that's why you connect and have so much empathy for him, even when he's kind of being like an opposite, dick and here and there, because you understand like that's how you might react to that, to the situation at hand. So yeah, I think Rizz did a great job as Ruben, and yeah, I like you said, I was along for the ride, and I think he just fell into this role, and I hope I can't wait to see him in whatever else he does next, because like you said, the movie lives or dies upon this character, and I think he was able to embrace and portray that character very, very strongly, and that's why I'm giving it a very strong one. That's pretty much it.
Well, if I may, Chris, I suffer from multiple sclerosis, and I lost the ability to use my hands, feeling in my hands, for a good while. And luckily, and I understand that, especially the desperation to find, one is all the workarounds you do to adapt to that life, and two is also the desperation to find. I was fortunate enough to find a drug that closed the lesions in my head, but and I got, I would say 85% of the feeling back in my, but I lost the sense. And you guys remember what that was probably for me. I couldn't hold something to save my life. I lost ability to type, all that kind of stuff. But nonetheless, Rizz Ahmed did a fantastic job in this. He spent, I think, 6 months learning sign language and working with the community and talking to people within the community to give the best portrayal he possibly could, because he didn't want to feel like this is a poser of some type or just someone acting. So he wanted to ingratiate himself in that society and build upon that. And I think it shows in his performance.
Yeah, well said.
So I'm going to give it a strong one. Actually, the strongest one of this movie.
Yeah, I completely agree. Rizz Ahmed, standout. I've always loved his acting, and he's a standout performer in this movie. That actually I thought had some other pretty good performances as well.
For sure it's him. Like the show.
Yeah, he was far and away the best, and you're right. Like it does show that he cared about what he was portraying on screen, and there is a lot of there seemed to be a lot of care put into the way that he acts and like talks.
Didn't feel cheap, I guess.
Yeah,
you can respect them pretty
people
much
who are deaf and with people who are, you know, not. It's like a whole separate thing, and like the way that he reacts after he gets the surgery is like a whole third different way that he kind of has to go and live in the world and stuff like that. So he does this great job of all that, and I have to give him a 1 for that. And like you said, probably the strongest one of the group. So I think that's ones all around, right?
Right on.
Ian, why don't you talk about supporting characters?
Jeff was his name. His counselor, Joe. Yeah.
Joe.
Phenomenal portrayal. I did a little bit of research. That the actor there, whose name I did not write down, I apologize.
Paul Raci,
something like that. Both his parents were deaf, and he has had a lot of experience working with the deaf community. They brought in a ton of deaf actors and actresses into this thing. I think that the care that was taken with because obviously the director's trying to tell the story, but he's allowing people within that community to tell their own stories as well. And I just want to give a one shout out the young woman who gets the tattoo. Had a great portrayal as well, but the kids were lovely, and I think that it was a very but not pandering portrayal of the deaf community, and I have to give it full credit for that. So I'm giving supporting a 1, even though the highest performances were Rizz as the protagonist and the actor Paul, who played Joe. They really had a lot of emotional weight to this.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. I'm going to just, I guess we'll have to mention Olivia Cook as well. Like she was like, I actually thought she was going to be in the movie more than she was, but I think it's worked out. Like it made sense that she wasn't. Like they had to separate, you know, for him to like go on this journey and like and come to the realization in the place that he arrived at by the end. So like, yeah, and you're right. Like it is very like you have to give a lot of credit and respect for the fact that sorry, Steve, who's the director? Darren, what's his name?
It is Darius Martyr.
Yes, that he's like allowed the deaf, you know, members of the deaf community to just kind of do the like portray it like as it were, like you said, like almost documentary cinema verite. I think you said, Chris, right? And that added a lot of validity to it. I think then that could have otherwise, felt cheap, felt like pandering, felt like it was like, oh, you know, some kind of like pity-ish thing or something like that, right? It didn't feel like icky, if you will, in the way that it could have felt handled otherwise. So yeah, I think that deserves a lot of credit. And just overall, I think the relationship was quite well. Like they played off each other. I think their chemistry, that Olivia and Rizz, that is, like that made sense. Like I bought into that as well. So for all those things, I will give it also a pretty damn solid 1 on secondary.
Yeah,
this is one of those things where I know a lot of times where we talk about characters and like how much or how little they are in it and how, the depth of their character. But even though like people like Joe and Lou were a little more fleshed out, Diane, the kids, the woman who gets the tattoo,
all that stuff, they all have their moments to like, you know, to breathe and live, right? Yeah.
They reflected who Joe was at that time. Like he and the woman he did the tattoo for had an honest relationship, so she could help him pack up his stuff, even though he was kind of doing it without anybody's knowledge. The kids reflected, and Diane reflected his hesitance and his acceptance. You know, everybody, even if they had like just basically a walk on, were important. In his Lou's father was
good,
really creepy actually, but but it explained so much about,
he was just standard old French guy, kind of aloof, kind of like kind of weird, but sure, that's a funny
weird
point.
narcissism about him. Awful.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that all the supporting characters were well done, and you know, the reason I'm probably going to give this a 1 is for Lou and Joe, to be honest. But I think everybody else, they did a good job being who they needed to be at that point in time in Ruben's life, right? Like everybody else is kind of like I don't want to say like furniture, but they're more like points. They're like points on the overall map of this thing, and Lou and Joe are more of like roads, right?
Yeah, but the map works out overall. I think you're saying to use this analogy, and I agree with that as well.
So yeah, I'm gonna give them a 1. Lou and Joe were the standouts, but I think everybody did a good job. So.
Chris, although I want to talk about Lou's father for a second, because you brought him up. It's interesting because we're all the protagonists for our own stories, and he had his own sufferings in life. Actually, some pretty terrible ones.
Yeah, he did.
It's interesting that like we're seeing Ruben his trials, but like it was interesting to me because I've gone through some shit in my life. It's everyone has that myopic view of their tragedies are because it's the most important to them, and they're right in feeling that way. Absolutely. But I think that actually Lou's father was a great recitation of the person who goes, "Oh, this happened to you? Well, this happened to me." And but that exists so much in life, and because we don't. And that's the importance of this film, is that it allows us to give insight into other people's trials. So that, and I don't know, I just thought that he was important for that reason.
What I found fascinating about him, and he's probably the most developed character with the least amount of screen time, because he invites him in. He's like, "Let me cook you an egg." It's this generous thing. And he said, "I didn't like you at first because you took Lou away from me, but I found out, when her mom took away and all this stuff." And it's kind of like, and then he has when he eats toast or something he caps it off. I don't remember what he says, but he invites Lou to sing with him, and she's really hesitant. And he's just, and Ruben couldn't really hear, but he's like, "Oh, you're great." And she goes, "That's my father's song." So that's why I'm like, you get this sense of narcissism. You get, as you said, Ian, you can't take anything away from a story because it's genuine.
Being their own protagonist.
But it said so much about him and about Joe. Or sorry, said so much to him and about Lou in so short of a time. That was magnificent.
And also, the minute you suffer a tragedy, you hear everyone else's sad story around you.
Of course, again, that's because that's her life.
Yeah,
and that felt true. Again, reflective of actual reality as well.
Oh, absolutely. All right, so that's ones all around for supporting. Scott, let's talk about dialogue.
So it's an interesting one. I'm going to give it a 1 on the onset, of course. Like, yes, because by very nature of it. So I actually thought it was a good choice and really well parsed out again. And we've used this word, and I'm going to use it again, like respectfully done and executed. That, of course, when they're talking, like, so Louis talking to him, he's like, "I can't hear you," so she has to write stuff down for him at on the onset of his losing his hearing. And then when he starts learning sign language, right, when he starts like picking up words, or at least learning the alphabet and stuff, right? So then he becomes more and more proficient at it. And they don't I have to give it thankfully they did not fucking subtitle it the whole way through. Now they did in some points after the fact, right? But I thought that was a really good choice to bounce out, because then it makes you feel, it actually, maybe this bleeds into style too, but I can't help but mention here, like there are points when Ruben does not know it and he's in the group, he's at the home, at the church, and everyone else is speaking in sign language and he doesn't know it. So you feel his isolation. You feel that he can't understand what they're saying. He knows they're talking, they're having conversation really, but he's not privy to it. And you feel that. And I thought that was really well done. And then eventually when he starts he does a surgery, he has it. And then so he can hear okay-ish, right? But it's not what he thinks is going to be. So then that also creates a different dynamic in terms of dialogue. So I thought all that stuff was really well done, and maybe the second strongest point of this film, just because again of the nature of it and the what's happening in the story. But I thought that shit was really well done and excellently sprinkled throughout the film, and everything else fine. And what they whether or not it was signed or written down or just spoken, the things that were communicated also made sense or realistic. Life is messy. He has a spat. Lou doesn't know what to do, trying to figure it out. When she calls, I guess their friend or their manager or something, and he's like, I can't hear a word you're fucking saying right now. Like, like that was all, again, felt very true. Felt realistic.
I think that was supposed to be it. I think that was a sponsor
or something. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Sure. It's just a bit unclear, like whoever they called was, but clearly he was like a friend of theirs who was trying to help them out. Right. Actually, he's the one who connected them to Joe's community church. Right. So anyway, all I'm saying is all that, because of the way it was handled, all that stuff was done deftly enough, again, with respect and, without feeling pandering, etc. The descriptions we've already used. Because of that, I'm giving it a 1.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think that the dialogue is really well done throughout, and they have to do it in several different ways, as you mentioned. I think that's the spoken dialogue is really. I mean, I think like every conversation in this is just down to earth, it feels real, and is really well scripted and acted. So I have to give dialogue a strong 1 as well.
I'm actually fascinated by the context of language as a linguist. But no, but actually, the fact is that even if I didn't know it was, yes, that alienation was perfect at the beginning, but as it goes on, I don't know American Sign Language, but I felt like I understood the context of conversations even if they weren't speaking, and it's. And there's one point in there where initially with Lou, where they're kind of in an argument and saying goodbye, and she's writing down certain things, but she says stuff. He knows what she said, even though he couldn't hear it, because he knows her well enough that he understood what was said there. And the way that they were handling the mixture of the ASL with spoken word, with you felt him get more comfortable, and you felt the breadth of this language, and how you the lip reading, the writing down, it was quite beautiful.
Yeah.
I did. You guys said a lot. I mean, just the variety of how people communicated was wonderful. And I do want to bring up one thing. It might be off the point a little bit, but talk about communication and nonverbal communication. I don't remember them bringing it up before the ending, but you knew that she had some issues she was dealing with. And when they're in bed, he pulls up her arm, and you could tell that
I noticed that, Chris. You're right. That's a very well done detail. Yeah.
He was a cutter, and he goes, he says something like no new
scratches or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Which also signified that she had moved on and found some kind of peace. Like it was yet another indicator. Yep. The levels of communication in this film are just spectacular. So I'm giving it a very strong 1 with as well with you guys.
There we go. So that's 4 1s. And we're going to move on to style. That's going to be me. First things first, the sound design of this movie is...
They had to get that right.
It's so good. Yeah. I mean, it goes above and beyond even what, they needed to do to make this a good movie. It's really good.
I don't know about it.
And I think that the rest of the style is good, but like the cinematography is like just good to me. Like nothing to write home about. I think they focused so much on, and which is fine. They focused so much on sound design, which makes sense for this type of film, that the visual wasn't really the biggest hurdle that they wanted to jump. But that being said, just for the sound design, I think it deserves a 1 for style. And there's some other stuff that I'll leave for you guys, but those are the things I wanted to bring up right away.
Actually, if you may, it was co-written with the director and his brother, who did the sound design for it, and who's a film score composer and has done a lot of like work in there. But this was specifically designed within the script to highlight and I thought that it was absolutely brilliant how they handled it. You understood his frustrations without making it inaccessible as a film to watch. And I just want to point on this, that the opening scene they're highlighting sounds in there to reinforce how, whether it's conversation, just natural, fun conversation with people, to the sound of the blender and the coffee machine, in order to deny you that later on, those common sounds that the average person expects to hear. It was handled spectacularly. And when you had the falseness of the implant later on, I was like, Jesus, I don't blame him at all. I would prefer silence over the high pitched frequency and feedback. Oh,
the
it was
constant little like buzz that he can't you can't control and can't get rid of, except for putting taking the implants off.
Yeah.
Now I agree with you guys. Like, yeah. So Steve, you said they went above me. I'm like, to me, like they had to nail it. Like if they didn't, you know what I mean? Like it was going to be a huge part of this film, again, by nature, by design. And yes, luckily, thankfully, they did nail it, because if it fell flat, it would have ruined it.
Yes.
But it was the opposite of that. And yeah, you're right. Like they sprinkled it, they set you up, like, right. So you feel it when you feel or / hear it, if you will, as the audience. But of course, because they have to make it like accessible to, film goers in general, right? So you can't do it the whole movie. So they did it just enough and laser targeted moments that then enhance the impactfulness of the character work.
They have to highlight the normal, and make it
so the
acknowledgeable, so that you
yeah.
then normality of your own life, you understand.
Yeah,
the pain.
it's that much more jarring. It's that was more like painful. It hits you like as the character, and it hits you as the audience as well. And yes, for sure, like buying away that is a standout. But I thought the cinematography like was good. It was fine. Like there was really cool shots, especially shots when he's on the church, like and like having a cigarette or whatever, just on the deck on the porch. Like the lighting was quite good, I think, overall. Many of the shots are. I liked it when he was in the RV, or when at least they, and then him and Ruben himself. Like, well, that was like really framed really well. So like all that, of course, combines, but certainly sound design is the absolute star of the style of this film, and giving it a 1.
Everything you guys have said and everything we've said up until now, I'm giving it a 1.
Right on.
All right.
I also do want to point out a visual aspect. You have the audiologist at the beginning, who is very much, I felt like almost a general practitioner style of it. And then you have the very sterile corporate view of the implants. And I think it's, for a movie that isn't focused on the visuals, it's actually a morality tale there, based on the doctor, because it's not demonizing science. It's just saying that you can't rush to
it's not a cure-all, be-all, end-all.
Yeah.
Thing, right?
So I thought that was an interesting visual. Like that's the one visual thing I noticed.
Good call.
All right.
Well, I think that adds to the style. Yeah, for sure.
Yep. So that's Styles getting 1 from everybody. And Chris, recommend.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing. I like the pharmacist, and I identify with that because when I lived in Raritan, which is a couple towns from here, there was a 24-hour Walgreens, and I'm a hypochondriac. I don't want to, and I would go there, and there was this one pharmacist who was very comforting. I didn't have to go to my GP. I'd go there, and she was just magnificent. And when I saw that pharmacist deal with him, I'm like, and the pharmacist I have now, she's fantastic. I love the portrayal of the pharmacist. You're very right. I love the pharmacist and the 2 different doctors also said a lot. With that said, I highly recommend this. The one good thing about the COVID this year is that we didn't chase a lot of films in the theater, and that a lot of stuff was sidetracked. And I think we might have missed this gem. We might have missed Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. We would have missed Honey Boy. It's just like this is one of these gems of this year that I'm so appreciative that we actually got a chance to see. I wanted to see it when Steve-O mentioned it last night. I'm like, yes, I'm so more excited to see this than I would have been Free Guy. Even though I want to see that, I was this is a gem of a film, and I highly recommend it.
I mean, yes, I'm definitely recommending it. And like, it's funny, Chris, like, yeah, like I personally like, I try to keep up on pop culture shit. That's our whole fucking stick in this channel here. However, I can't keep up on everything. And I feel like this one is sort of under the radar. Like I was unfamiliar with it completely until it came up, until we're like, shit, Free Guy. Like, yeah, Free Guy is supposed to be like originally like AR plan, like a fun little breezy, like whatever. Ryan Reynolds is a fucking sentient NPC, like whatever. That seems fun, right?
Yeah.
But again, corporation circumstances, a la sort of almost medley, a la this film, conspired to make it be that we're not going to get to it. So like, yeah, I like I said, I wouldn't probably have not have heard of this or even at least watched it, and were not for the fact of all of that. And now that I have, fuck yeah, it's a really well done movie with great performances, especially from Rizz, right? And especially with the nature of the character and I would say protagonist, like we said, protagonist and style, right? Combined, and maybe some dialogue in there. But all I'm saying is like those things combined to make it a very recommendable movie, a very watchable movie, and possibly like he might be or should be given a nod at this point, like possibly for, if this qualifies as an Oscar-worthy film or Oscar-eligible film or whatever.
I've heard some talk about him getting,
and I would be totally okay with that because
at least on some levels.
Because I do think it's again a very engaging and just worth a watch, and will make you feel something. And perhaps as bittersweet as it might be, there has elements enough of both, with a great story, again, script, etc., everything we just said on top of all that, to make it a very worthy recommendation.
Yeah. I agree. I think that this is a really, really well done movie. We're going to give it a very strong score here. And yeah, it's definitely worth a watch. It is, as was mentioned earlier, it is a movie that is kind of slowly paced, and it's fairly long. It's like 2 hours. So it's not like, don't do it as like a party movie on a Saturday or something, but like
definitely more serious and deserves a more serious watch.
But yeah, it's a really well done take on this guy going through everything that he goes through, and definitely worth a watch. I was going to say something else and I completely forgot what it was. Oh, and in terms of Oscars, I'm not sure if this is eligible because technically the IMDb page has it coming out in 2019.
I'm not saying necessarily for Oscars. I'm just saying that like
just
for
as
awards type stuff.
He deserves recognition for it, if not the Academy, like whatever. They can go jerk themselves off anyways. So
clear it up. And then and that that's pretty much all I have to say about it. I definitely think that it is worth your time. Check it out.
Did I recommend First Cow?
I don't remember, dude.
I don't think you did.
I don't remember.
It feels like you probably didn't, but I don't fucking know offhand.
Because this is to me is between comparing it to movies between First Cow and Never Rarely, Sometimes Always. And by that I mean our recommendation, because I don't think this is for everyone, and I think it is a good film. I enjoyed it. You say the thing, would I watch this again? And I don't know if I would.
I would watch it with someone who hadn't seen it. I probably might watch it again myself, but if that
I think the performance of Rizz Ahmed is very well done. I just think it's a very niche thing. So I might voice here on no to recommendation, even though I did enjoy the film because of, I think, the niche appeal of it.
Okay. I mean, I see what you mean. Sure, like I'm just saying, like I would if someone said, like, "Hey, I've heard this movie, Sound of Metal. Like, did you watch it?" I'll be like, "Yes." And do you like it? Like, yeah, you should watch it. Like almost anybody, any random person on the street who asked me that, or someone I encountered. But
I would have to be, what type of movies are you into?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like you're right. It might be a little more niche, a little more like not as broadly appealing than other shit might be. I get that, but I'm still sticking with the recommendation. I don't remember.
No,
I don't even remember if I recommended First Cow or not. Like,
oh no, that First Cow is much slower. Yeah,
I wasn't on First Cow, but I remember you guys talking at Postcast, and I could have sworn, like, my sense memory is that nobody recommended it.
I don't fucking remember, but
see, if I recommended First Cow, I have to recommend this one. Sure. But because if I didn't, it's for similar reasons of that it's a niche film that.
But
Hey,
I
I
get you.
get it. That's fine. It's a fine argument for a 0.
Not they didn't like it, just like that's a caveat there.
Yeah.
Sure.
So all right, that's gonna do it for
How's the breakdown?
our scores here. Chris gave the highest score with a 10. Scott, you and I gave it a 9, and Ian gave it an 8.
With that, an 8.
Yeah, so Ian took off points for plot and recommend, and Scott and I both took off points for plot as well. And that's where we stand. So
it's a 9, right?
What does that average out to? Yeah.
It is the aggregate score is a 9.
Sure. Yeah, and that's fine. It's a very strong film. Like, I guess my final thought is like, I enjoyed it quite a bit, as we just talked out. I think I still enjoyed Mank better, even though like that particular episode we gave it a lower score than a 9. But I think that's fine that Sound of Metal earned a 9 because I think it did. It deserves it. So.
Yeah,
it deserves an art house 9.
An art house 9. There you go. All right, so I think that's going to wrap it up for us. I've been your host, Steve Ramosi, and you have been here with Jonathan Ian Manzer, Christopher Morgan,
peace and long life,
and Scott Thurlow.
Insert drum solo here. Thanks for joining us. See you next time. Peace.
Cheers.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.
Or mods?